Alright, let's dive into a story that's way more complex than it seems on the surface. Here's the deal. A family in rural South Wales is facing a massive upheaval because a school transport scheme, something called the Purchase Pass system, has been scrapped. Now, on the surface, this might sound like a bureaucratic hiccup, but personally, I think it's a perfect example of how small policy changes can have absolutely massive ripple effects on real people's lives. Let me break it down for you. First, what's this Purchase Pass system? Essentially, it allowed parents to buy a spare seat on council-run school buses for their kids if they lived outside the school's catchment area. Sounds like a practical solution, right? But here's where it gets messy. The Department for Transport changed some regulations, and now these passes can't be offered under the same terms. The reason? Something about accessibility requirements for vehicles. Honestly, I find it fascinating how these behind-the-scenes policy shifts can suddenly upend someone's entire life. It's like pulling a thread on a sweater and watching the whole thing unravel. Now, let's talk about the family at the center of this. Dawn Hill, a 59-year-old private pediatric nurse, and her husband Michael, 65, both work shifts. Their son is 14, entering his GCSE years, a critical time for any student. Here's the kicker: neither parent can do the school run because of their work hours. Dawn doesn't get home until 10 a.m., and Michael's shifts are from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. What many people don't realize is how common this kind of scheduling conflict is for working families, especially in rural areas. It's not just about convenience, it's about survival. The Hills looked into alternatives, like hiring a private taxi, but the cost would be astronomical. Dawn is the primary earner, so if they can't figure this out, Michael might have to quit his job. And here's where it gets really grim. Dawn says they might have to sell their home because they couldn't afford the mortgage. I mean, think about that for a second. A policy change that seems minor on paper could lead to a family losing their house. That's wild. But what makes this really interesting is the emotional toll. Their son has been walking to the bus stop independently for years, and he loves that freedom. Now, without the Purchase Pass, his journey would double to about half a mile, on a road with no footpaths, no lighting, and heavy traffic. Dawn describes it as unsafe, and honestly, I'd be worried too. Plus, her son is upset about losing his independence. It's not just about logistics, it's about the psychological impact on a teenager who's already dealing with the stress of GCSEs. Here's another layer: the council says they informed parents about the changes in advance. But from my perspective, knowing something's coming doesn't make it any easier to deal with, especially when the alternatives are so bleak. And while there's a potential exemption scheme in the works, it's not a guarantee. It's like dangling a lifeline that might not even exist. If you take a step back and think about it, this story is about more than just one family. It's about the fragility of systems we rely on, the unintended consequences of policy changes, and the way these decisions disproportionately affect rural communities. Personally, I think it raises a deeper question: how do we balance regulatory compliance with the real-world needs of families? Because right now, it feels like the system is failing the Hills, and probably countless others in similar situations. What this really suggests is that we need to rethink how we approach these issues. Maybe it's about finding creative solutions, like subsidizing transport costs or re-evaluating catchment areas. Or maybe it's about recognizing that sometimes the human cost of policy changes is just too high. Either way, this story has stuck with me because it's a reminder that behind every policy, there are real people with real lives that can be completely upended. So, here's my closing thought: next time you hear about a seemingly minor policy change, ask yourself who it's really affecting. Because chances are, There's a family out there, maybe even in your own community, who's facing a crisis you never saw coming. And that, to me, is what makes this story so important. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below.